What are the scientifically proven strategies that we can start using today to strengthen the mind? By the end of this video, you will take away 3 evidence-based strategies that you can use to strengthen the mind by nurturing your mental well-being and happiness. In this video, we're going to focus on how we can reduce or manage our negative emotions to strengthen our mind and to increase our happiness. So stay until the end of this video to learn and use scientific knowledge to strengthen the mind. Negative emotions are indeed inevitable in life, but how can we make sure that they do not damage our happiness and physical well-being? Research shows that letting it go is indeed an effective strategy not only for reducing our negative emotions, but also for protecting our physical health in the far future. When a stressful event occurs at home or at work, when we get into an argument with a friend or family member, or when something really bad happens to our friend or family, we can feel a range of different negative emotions like feeling angry, frustrated, restless, sad, ashamed, fearful, and so on. And the list goes on. And often these negative emotions can last for several days. In a survey study of 1,155 people, they were asked whether or not a stressful event occurred to them and how much of the negative emotions they felt each day for 8 consecutive days. And after 10 years, the same people were asked in terms of their health conditions. The results showed that the longer people held on to negative emotions over several days, the more likely they had suffered from physical illnesses 10 years later. So how quickly we can forget and let go of our negative emotions really contributes to our emotional and even physical well-being. One of the worst feelings that I've ever felt in my life was when I got into a really bad argument with my wife one night, and we went to sleep without resolving this conflict, and so we were sort of lying on the bed on the 2 different ends of the bed. And this anger inside me kept me awake for the entire night. I couldn't get any sleep that night because I was just so angry, and this anger inside me created this endless trail of evil thoughts and imaginations about what could happen between us. And this was after we got married. And it really literally felt like pouring toxin into my heart. It's quite extraordinary how toxic emotions can conjure up toxic thoughts in my mind and cause physical illnesses. But how does holding on to negative emotions longer cause physical illnesses later in the future? Could be that this anger and all these negative emotions cause our mind to start imagining negative and sometimes really evil, sinful thoughts in our mind, and that the longer we hold on to these evil imaginations, they might cause mental illnesses and physical illnesses later in the future. So don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. What kind of negative emotions are you still holding on to today, and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below. But simply letting go of our negative emotions seems impossible at times. So what's another alternative strategy that we can use to reduce our negative emotions? Research shows that cognitive reappraisal, or changing the way we think about the situation by seeing it in a more positive light, can help with reducing our negative emotions. But the same research also shows that when we use this strategy all the time, it can actually reduce or have a negative impact on our emotional well-being. In a study that was conducted over 7 days, research shows that people who use cognitive reappraisal strategy, or changing the way you think about the situation to see it in a more positive light, experience greater well-being when they use the strategy for uncontrollable negative events that happen to them. So if something bad happens and you cannot control the outcome of this event, using that cognitive reappraisal strategy is actually effective at reducing the negative emotions. But people who use this strategy change the way you think about the situation when they face controllable negative events, things that are under your control, the things that you can actually do something, take actions to change the situation. When people use this cognitive reappraisal strategy for these kind of controllable events, that using this kind of strategy actually reduced their well-being. So cognitive reappraisal can actually reduce your well-being if it's used unnecessarily in situations that are under your control. So blindly trying to see everything in a positive light can create a toil on your mind and your physical well-being. Sometimes we need to really see and experience these negative emotions as they are, if they're experienced in situations that are under your control. So for example, last birthday, I received a letter that said that your academic paper that you submitted to a journal was rejected. So I got this rejection letter on my birthday. And now it would have been much better if I had acknowledged all these negative emotions and just move on, because these kind of academic papers can be revised and resubmitted into different journals. And so that was completely under my control. I had the power to change the outcome by working harder on revising my paper and to submit it to a different journal, right? But another example is when I was living in this house, and the owner of the house sold the house to someone else, and so we had to find a new place to move out within a month. And that kind of situation, it's not under my control, and something bad happened. It's not that truly bad, but some negative event happened that we were feeling like we were being forced out of our house, like almost like being kicked out of the house. But changing the way I think about that situation to think that, oh, it's just a perfect opportunity to find a better house than what I was living in. And so we had a new baby, and we were sort of expecting another baby soon. So it's a perfect opportunity to find a new place to move to and live. So like that, changing the way I think about the situation when the situation itself is uncontrollable, and seeing it in a more positive light, trying to think about ways you can see this negative event in a more positive light can actually help us improve our well-being. But when a negative event occurs that's uncontrollable, what kind of cognitive reappraisal could actually be more effective in improving our emotional well-being? So for example, I can imagine two types of cognitive reappraisal to see the situation more positive light. First is by imagining the things that could have been worse, and so seeing the current situation in a more positive light. For example, when a house gets robbed, we could imagine that we're lucky because we were not harmed by the robber, or we didn't get murdered or physically damaged by or attacked by this robber. And so I'm grateful that we're still alive, although we might have lost many things that are valuable, that we are all safe, right? So what I'm doing there is sort of imagining the worst things that could have happened to us, and doing so would allow us to see the current negative situation in a more positive light. Another strategy for cognitive reappraisal could be that we could imagine an opportunity, a more positive opportunity. For example, if a house gets robbed, we could see that as an opportunity to improve on our home security so that those events would not happen again in the future. And so interpreting that negative event as a positive opportunity to improve our home security is a different type of cognitive reappraisal. And so the question of what type of reappraisal could be more effective in managing or reducing our negative emotions when a uncontrollable event that happens to us? That would be an interesting question to explore. The current research teaches us that when we face negative events that are under our control, we should not use cognitive reappraisal. But when we face these negative events that are uncontrollable, that we cannot do anything to change the outcome, then trying to interpret the situation in a more positive light can help improve our well-being. What kind of uncontrollable events happen to you that you try to see it in a more positive light through cognitive reappraisal? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Think positively. There are so many books, videos, and articles that simply recommend to people that we should just start thinking positively. But research shows that this strong tendency to think positively or to fantasize about our future can actually reduce our well-being. So blindly hoping that only the positive things will happen in the future, just thinking positively about the future, can actually harm us and reduce our happiness, because when a negative event actually occurs in the future, we become even more disappointed because we have higher and more positive expectations about the future. And when a negative event happens to us, we've become much more disappointed and feel greater negative emotions. And also, just thinking positively about the future, fantasizing about the future, can often reduce our well-being by reducing our effort that we can use to actively change the situations that we face. So in a study, people were asked to imagine different types of scenarios and try to also imagine what the likely outcomes will be for each one of these scenarios. And so, for example, in one scenario, people were given a task at work for a client, and they had to meet a certain deadline, but they couldn't because maybe the workload was just too much, and they had to write an email asking the client to extend the deadline, right? And they had to imagine what kind of outcomes will happen, will turn out to be, whether or not the client would give you the deadline extension, or whether or not the client will refuse that and still enforce you to meet that deadline. And so they were given a number of these scenarios, and they had to sort of imagine what outcomes will be for each one of these scenarios. The results showed that people who tend to write more positively about the expected outcomes in the future actually experienced more depressive symptoms after 4 weeks than people who were not trying to fantasize too much about the future. We can really hurt ourselves if we create an unrealistically positive ideal future for us. We cannot hope that only the positive events will occur to us in the future. But is there a way to prevent feeling less happy in the future when we always trying to think positively about the future and always trying to fantasize too much about the future? It could be that the underlying the reason why we think positively about the future can have an influence on whether or not we feel more happy or less happy in the future. For instance, it could be that the fantasizing about the future or thinking positively about the future could be actually beneficial for us if we believe that those positive things will happen to us if we put in extra effort. And so simply blindly imagining that only the positive things will happen to us no matter what, versus thinking that only the positive things will happen to us if we put in the effort and the time and the work that are required for improving the future. The second strategy of preconditioning the positive future expectations with the need to expend effort could actually help us to improve our happiness, even if we always fantasize about the future. Now, if we believe that only the positive things will happen to us, if given that we spend additional or extra effort, then that could be a healthy way of fantasizing about the future. So it'd be interesting to study how we can change the way we think about the future, how we can change the way we fantasize about the future to make it more healthy for our emotional well-being. One of my biggest weaknesses is that I set too many ambitious goals in my life. And setting too many goals means the more likely that I will fail some of my goals, right? And because for someone who only have a smaller number of goals versus someone who has so many ambitious goals, the chance for that the second person who has a lot of different goals of failing is higher, obviously. So, but over so in my life, I learned through constant failures, right? Having too many goals leads to more number of failures. I've learned the fact that not all goals that I set, I will be able to achieve them. And so I think it's been healthy in a sense that whenever I set goals with the expectation that I may not achieve this goal, it's consistent with this research that I'm not just always imagining the best for my life, that I'll be able to achieve all of these goals, that I acknowledge the fact that I can sometimes fail to achieve some of these goals, and that helps me to stay sane even when I fail to achieve some of these goals. That having that expectation that not all goals can be achieved, that some goals, even of course the basic condition to achieving those goals is to expend effort, that try harder, working harder. But even if I do work harder, that I can sometimes fail to achieve these goals, and that I think is a healthy mindset that we can all have. We really need to see our future as it is, that both positive and negative things can happen to us in life, that there will be suffering, that there will be tears, pain, and evil, but also joy, strength, happiness, and love. Expecting that some things can really go wrong in the future can help us prepare and strengthen the mind mentally. What are your goals, and what things can go wrong to prevent you from achieving those goals? Share your thoughts in the comments below. So the 3 key takeaways from this video are: first, learning to let go of our negative emotions so that we don't hold on to these negative emotions over several days can really help to improve our emotional well-being and also improve our physical well-being in the future. Second, we need to learn to use cognitive reappraisal, or changing the way we think about the situation to see it in a more positive light, but only for events, negative events that are uncontrollable. If we use this kind of cognitive reappraisal for events that are actually controllable, then it can also backfire and reduce our happiness. Third, we need to acknowledge that negative things can happen in the future, that we should not always fantasize about the future, that only the positive things will happen to us in the future. The tendency to fantasize about the future can really damage our happiness, because when a negative event really occurs in the future, it makes us much more disappointed. And it also, that kind of mindset doesn't help with our efforts, that we simply imagine that only the positive things will happen to us, so that we don't need to expend much effort to change our outcomes. So that's not a healthy way of managing our emotions and negative emotions and our well-being. I'm glad that you're here, because you can now use scientific knowledge to strengthen your mind and to nurture your mental well-being. Subscribe to get more scientifically proven strategies to strengthen your mind.